Spring split doesn't matter. That's an attitude held by many pro players, teams and fans alike. Is that really true though? We're gonna look at that in this video. So, to clarify first, we need to define when spring actually matters. How do we define if it matters or if it doesn't matter? And I'm only talking about LSE and LCS for this video. So, when did spring not matter? When you either couldn't go to MSI or being there didn't turn out worth it. Now, for the last 6 seasons, 2015 to 2020, I looked at all the spring champions from Europe and North America and I decided, was it worth for them or was it not worth for them having won the spring, having gone full power in spring, won the split and yeah, won it. So when was it not worth it? In only 3 cases out of those 12 spring playoffs. And that's LCS 2020 Cloud9, LEC 2020 G2 and LEC 2016 G2. So why were those cases not worth it? In 2020 you couldn't go to MSI. There was no MSI, so there was literally no point in winning the spring split. And in 2016 G2, that was that whole G2 weeks vacation meme where they apparently didn't fully try at MSI or took a vacation right before, and therefore they didn't perform there, and also it didn't really seem to have helped them later on in the year, having gone to that MSI in spring. Obviously, I'm not a part of the team. I've never been a part of that team, so I don't really know if it's actually if it might have helped them in some way, but it just didn't seem like it did. So 3 splits, 3 spring playoffs did not matter. Now I argue that the other 9 spring splits did very much matter. So when does spring matter? When you either had a memorable performance at MSI or when it helped you improve for Worlds. So quickly going through these. LCS 2019 Team Liquid had a great performance at MSI, memorable, made it to the finals, no discussion there. And well, there might be a discussion. Some people might argue, yeah, well, I only care about Worlds. But hold on a second, you're talking about the Western teams here. For 99% of the Western teams, making it to MSI finals and having a good performance there is the highest point they will ever reach in their lives. So it very much does matter, at least in a sense of competition and greatness. You need those performances at the end of your career. You need to be able to say, I won my region, I performed great internationally, I had memorable all-time great best of 5 series internationally, and those things can happen as MSI and as Worlds. Despite there being people who say they don't care about MSI, it still very much matters in terms of legacy. 2018 Team Liquid did not do that great at MSI, but did well. They didn't do great at Worlds, but I would argue it did help them improve. They won the spring, they won the summer just as handedly, 3-0. No, they did not. At the very least, it didn't hurt them having tried hard in spring, and I would argue it helped them improve for Worlds as well. 2017 TSM, same thing pretty much. They won the spring. They were they were just a great team all throughout the year, and I would argue it helped them prepare for the international event at Worlds in autumn. 2016 CLG, great performance at MSI. Everybody remembers that. 2015 Fnatic. 2015 Fnatic in spring in Europe, of course, great performance at MSI, I would argue. Memorable, and also pretty sure it did help them improve for Worlds that year, because also at Worlds they performed great. 2017 LEC G2 did great at MSI, reached the finals, memorable series against SKT. 2018 LEC Fnatic did great at MSI. Well, did good at MSI, but for sure helped them improve for Worlds. 2019 LEC G2 won MSI. Greatest performance of a Western team ever, at least in terms of tournament wins. That was the best tournament ever won by a Western team, I would argue. Okay, now to the criticisms. Why could people argue spring doesn't matter, or it could even hurt you to try hard in spring? But it won't help me win Worlds. That's the biggest thing most people say. Well, that's not true. Spring doesn't help you qualify to Worlds. But being at MSI and getting to scrim all these teams is the biggest factor in actually improving for Worlds. Over the entire year, you're never going to be able to improve so much as you are in that MSI bootcamp. So that's a big point for Western regions, of course, that is. Not going to MSI means you have that much more to catch up on at Worlds. That's literally the biggest talking point of every Western player ever that goes to Worlds. Why is it so hard? It's because all the Asians have such a fucking head start because they scrim each other all year long, and China and Korea have the best players and teams already. So, I mean, how are you gonna catch up if not use that extra opportunity you get in spring for the MSI bootcamp? Winning Worlds means you have to catch up twice, once at MSI and once at the Worlds bootcamp. Of course, you can just not go to MSI and then do all the catching up at Worlds, but that's gonna be a whole lot harder. If you're lucky, like G2 is right now, you happen to be in the region that hosts the MSI for this year. MSI is being held in Iceland in a few weeks, so G2 is very lucky not having qualified to it. They do get to scrim the Asian teams once they get here for MSI. It would be even better for them if MSI was held in China or Korea and they had managed to qualify so they could scream all the Chinese and Korean teams. But this way, at least, the best, also down one, and the Chinese champions are gonna come to Europe, and G2 is for sure gonna get a few scrims in against them, which is gonna help them for sure, but not as much if they had actually been able to qualify for MSI. Chilling in spring also won't help you qualify Worlds. That's the weirdest thing I ever see. People say, yeah, I don't want to try so hard in spring. It doesn't help me qualify for Worlds either. Yeah, but not doing good in spring also won't help you qualify. Like, what's the point? Spring is literally just a bonus. And what the fuck of a competitive mindset even is that to say, yeah, I mean, I'll take half the year off. I'll take half the year lighter just so I can do good at Worlds. If you're gonna say that, you have to put up numbers. And this goes into my next point. People say, oh, but I want to pace myself and slowly ramp up for Worlds. Let me break it to you. Nobody in the history of League of Legends has ever successfully done that. Arguably Origin 2015 is the only case of a Western team chilling in spring and then qualifying for Worlds. But that's not replicable because the only way they got to chill in spring is by qualifying through the Challenger Series, which admittedly was a laughable competition. They swept that easily, but it came with the risk of not even getting into LCS. And that happened many times in the history of Europe. Sometimes the best amateur team, the best team from the below LCS circuit, just didn't get into LCS because somebody got banned before the qualifier, somebody got sick, somebody didn't want to play anymore. Something just happened, or just they had terrible luck on the day the qualifiers happened, and then the entire season would have gone to shit if Origin didn't perform as well as they did in spring. So although they did chill in spring and tried hard in summer and at Worlds and had a great run at Worlds, that's the only time that ever happened from a Western team, and it did come with a lot of risk involved. So don't tell me that. Don't tell me you're gonna pace yourself and slowly ramp up for Worlds. Now, hold on a second, you're gonna say, oh, but G2 said they were gonna do that. G2 is literally the only team that can reasonably walk around with that hubris and even pretend that they are serious about this. But let me tell you this, in 2019, they will admit to this, they did not do that. They went full steam in spring, peaked at MSI, and then they said, yeah, they felt a little bit burned out for Worlds, but hold on a second, yeah? They said they were going to do it differently the next year. 2020, they paced themselves for Worlds, I guess. At least they said they were going to do that. They didn't look any better at Worlds, though, that year. They didn't get to go to MSI. They still won spring, but they said they don't care about spring, so shouldn't be a problem not going to MSI, right? Well, wait a minute. They didn't look any better at Worlds than the year before. Arguably, they look worse. I would say they look worse than in 2019. 2019, it might have been that they were burned out by the time Worlds came around. But with that improvement they made at MSI, being the best team in the world when MSI took place, arguably behind IG, but at least top 2. At that point in time, they might have used up all their steam, but by the time Worlds came around, they were still good enough to compete with the best teams in the world and still made finals. 2020, nothing of the same story. They did not get to go to MSI, and look what happened. That exactly even proves my point. They didn't manage to look as good as Worlds anymore as they did the year before. Of course, there's more context to it, but that's just generally what I get from that. So, the last point people might bring up is the post-MSI slump could hinder them from qualifying to Worlds. Now, that's a bit of a myth, that post-MSI slump, but I believe in it. I think there's something to it. It might just be, yeah, teams usually do a little bit worse and need some time readjusting. Maybe just, as I said, are a bit burned out after MSI, or maybe don't take their local competition as seriously anymore after having been to MSI and having seen much better play. Maybe they just get complacent, but shut up that this is a point that seriously concerns you. Don't tell me that the MSI slump is gonna make it impossible for you to qualify for Worlds. Every LCS and LEC team that ever won the spring split, ever, went to Worlds that year except last year's Cloud9, and that's arguably because there was no MSI. Again, that proves my fucking point. You need that MSI experience to become a good team, even if you're gonna slump a little bit in the early phase of the summer split. The slump really only has been observed in the early summer split weeks, and most teams recover for playoffs. Again, every team that wins spring in the Western region goes to MSI. Every time. Every time. One exception, and that's exactly when there was no MSI, so that, if anything, proves my point. So, what can we take from it? Spring split does matter, but regular seasons don't matter. So, even if you say, you take a little bit of a back in the regular split in spring and in summer, like G2 and Fnatic have done in past years, and that works well for them, although that also doesn't come without risk. Even if you're gonna have that attitude, winning the spring split still does matter greatly if you want to do great things at Worlds. Therefore, slumping in the summer split early on is worth it 10 times, 100 times, because you get that MSI experience. And I mean, that's just a buzzword, of course, MSI experience. What I mean by that is you get to scrim against the best teams in the world that you have no chance of testing yourself against in your home Western regions. So, spring split does fucking matter. Please quit saying that you're just gonna chill in spring and be good for Worlds. It's never been done. The opposite has been proven, if anything. Please, G2, win spring next year.